Hello and welcome to Keep Right On, a Birmingham City podcast brought to you by us at Birmingham Live. I'm Brian Dick and I'm joined as ever by our Blues reporter Alex Dicken, and also you'll notice by two new guests who we hope you'll become familiar with if you don't already know them from their Blues insights on social media. Welcome Ryan Deeney and Ben from Blues Breakdown. Thanks for joining us, guys. It's brilliant to have you here with us. Hopefully we'll see plenty of you over the coming months. Thanks for agreeing to take part, and we really look forward to your viewpoint on what is often a head-spinning world of Birmingham City. So, straight down to it. The transfer window closed at 11 o'clock last night, although for Blues it was more like 7 o'clock when the club's media staff were sent home. Alex was at the training ground in Henley and Arden for Tony Mowbray's press conference yesterday, and following those events, which I have to say were all rather, don't know what we're saying, organised, structured, dare I say sensible. There was no bright Enabakari or Renat Dedashov antics from anybody last night. Alex, what did you make of it all?
It wasn't head spinning when we came on there. It wasn't head spinning at all, was it? It was actually very straightforward and simple for once. Even the Summer Blues made a couple of signings on deadline day. There was a last minute deal for Oliver Burke, but this time around it was plain sailing. We kind of got the impression from Tony Mowbray straight away in his press conference that they wouldn't be able to do anything unless somebody left the club, and there were none of those kind of out of contract players in 6 months' time who are willing to step forward and give up the final 5 months of their deal and move on somewhere else. So they would have liked to sign a goalkeeper. We'll come on to that in more detail later. But it wasn't going to happen without somebody leaving. So we all ended up finishing a little bit earlier than anticipated. I know I did, Brian. I'm not sure you did, but it was nice to work in a window where Blues were very organised right from the outset when Tony Mowbray arrived, and that couldn't have been easy given the change of manager.
No, I didn't finish early at all. In my current role, I get to read about Stoke City and Forest and all the other Midland sides, and Stoke City completed 3 or 4 deals in pretty much after 11 o'clock. It was an absolute hailstorm of stuff coming out of Stoke. But there we go. Ryan, welcome. Tell us a little bit about where people can find your stuff and your thoughts about the transfer window as a whole, please.
Obviously, I'm Ryan. My stuff can be found on Substack, so you'll be able to find the link on my Twitter page, which is at Ryan Deeney 2194. Transfer deadline date. To be honest, I was part of the Not the Top 20 podcast transfer deadline day feed yesterday that they did on their website, and it was all a little quiet. And then, as always happens, it reached sort of 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and everything just seemed to be happening at once. Obviously, a lot of loan deals seem to be happening, which I'm guessing is normally the case on deadline day anyway. So the transfer deadline as a whole, I think, was just like quieter than normal. And it was nice for Blues to be in a situation whereby, from our perspective, we weren't rushing around. We weren't desperate to sign in players. When you think of the last 2 windows, we were desperate to sign a striker in the summer and end up with Ollie Burke. We were desperate to sign a left back in January, and we ended up giving Emmanuel Longella a 3-year deal, I think. And obviously signing him permanently after missing out on other targets. So it was nice to have a window where you can be relatively satisfied with what you've got, while also, kind of wishing you maybe brought in that extra player or two. But I think we're in a good spot anyway, moving forward now. Yeah,
but Ben, I said I wasn't going to individually invite everyone into the conversation, but I will just say hello to you, Ben, as it's your first time we're hearing from you. Tell us where we can find your stuff and your thoughts about the transfer window as a whhole, please.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. Yes, you can follow me on Twitter, or X as it is these days, at @blues_breakdown. The transfer window as a whole, I think, was fairly successful from a Birmingham perspective, and I think we'll come on to some of the reasons why a little bit later on. Deadline day, none of the drama that we've had over the last couple, I guess, which is nice. Although I think as fans, you're always desperate for that kind of, that rumour out of nowhere, and that last minute player that becomes available. That's all quite exciting. But no, nice to see that probably the club had a plan from the outset, and by and large, I think they'll be happy with what they've got. Did wonder if there might be another signing later on in the day with Alex Pritchard being announced fairly early yesterday morning. Tends to be. I think if they've got only one to announce on a deadline day, they might drag it out as long as they possibly can. But no, I think relatively satisfied with the lot that we've got at the moment to see us through to the rest of the season.
Yeah, that's interesting because the last minute rumour that you were looking forward to is the stuff that makes mine and Alex's blood run cold.
I was just going to say that. I was dreading that sort of thing. God, thankfully it didn't happen.
I think probably my worst ever transfer day was the January 2020 one. January 2020 was when Blues were, I made reference to it in the intro, when Blues were trying to sign Brighton and Bakari, and it was a deal that was on at the start of the window, then off towards the end of the window, then back on and off in the space of a day twice on transfer deadline day, and then they went to this striker called Azerbaijani lad called Renat Dadashev, who. And we're talking 5 to 11 here now, and it all seems like it's all going to go through. They've at least got a body in, albeit someone who'd never played senior football, and then he decided he didn't want to come. So whilst some Blues fans are feasting on that kind of uncertainty and excitement, I cannot tell you how stressful it is it, Alex?
Yeah, and also how often do you get a good player right at the end of the transfer window? I'm not digging out Oliver Burke again. But
3 mentions already, Oliver Burke.
That one hasn't worked yet, and that was probably a last minute deal in the summer. So yeah, you don't. There's a reason why all these players are available at the end of the window, isn't there? It's because they haven't been signed beforehand. So I was really, really pleased to see Blues get those 3 deals done relatively early.
Yeah. So let's come to them. Alex Pritchard. Ben, what's your? I know you do deep dive into the stats and how players perform. What's your perception of Alex Pritchard?
I think Alex Pritchard's a really tidy signing for us for a number of reasons. Not least the fact that he's worked under Tony Mowbray previously and fairly recently as well. Obviously during his time up at Sunderland. Plenty of experience, both Championship and a little bit of Premier League experience as well. He's 30 years old now. He's been around, seen it, done it. And I've always thought as a player, he probably brings a little bit of bite to the side as well. He's got a little bit about him. Certainly not going to be pushed around despite his diminutive size on the pitch. I think we were linked with him two seasons ago, 2 years ago. I think at that point then, my thoughts were a little bit, could we do better? And then when he rocked up at Sunderland, I kind of went, yeah, okay. And it was one of those when we didn't get him that I wasn't overly fussed about. I think the reported fee that we've probably paid for him and things like that this time round, I think it's a really, really sensible deal. I think we've probably had to offer him the sweetener of a 2.5-year deal to get him to come. But I think he's a player that's going to make an immediate impact, and he's probably going to elevate the side right away. And I think, as much as we really enjoy the signings of young up-and-coming players from League One or League Two or whatever, I think there's a lot to be said for getting guys in who've been there, done it, seen it, and can make an immediate impact, even if it is across a shorter time period, 6 to 18 months or so. So, I like it.
Do you see him as a bit of a cheat code for to sort of get Mowbray ball underway a little bit? Do we think that's what's going on there?
I think so. I think I get the impression we're going to not. I've said this previously. I don't think he necessarily will transform our season into something incredible now. But I think he'll help with the transformation of getting Mowbray ball up and running. And I think what we'll find is, obviously, he provides that bit of bite, he provides that energy, he provides the quality. But I think we'll also see someone who is likely to be a bit of a leader and a bit of an organiser on the pitch as well. He'll see things that are happening, he'll see the game happening, see the pictures, and he'll you've probably seen him organising other people as well, or maybe moving himself into different positions in order to make us, get on the ball and start ticking. And supporting his other guys. Obviously, you've got JJ in midfield. You've got Bakuna, who's always a bit, here, there, and everywhere. Dadal's still, a relatively younger player. So I think he'll help in sort of that aspect too, where he'll provide a bit of leadership in that midfield, which is something that we've probably lacked for quite a while now. I know we're certainly lacking it last season at times when you think of that bad run we had last year, and you've got Bielik in the middle of midfield, and then you've got Hannibal, you've got Chong, you've got, obviously, again, I know Bakuna's a more experienced player now, but you can't really sort of rely on him to do a role and stick to that position, can you? So I think Pritchard provides a lot of that as much as, the natural quality that he will bring.
Yeah, I remember Pritchard playing for Brentford. I think he was on loan from Tottenham at the time, and he wound Stephen Gleeson up to the point where a normally fairly mild-mannered Gleeson just ended up kicking him and getting sent off. And then Gleeson was first out of the training room, out of the dressing room, came down the tunnel, and he actually stopped and said, "Do you want to do an interview?" And I can count on the hands on the fingers of one hand the number of times players have said, "Do you want to do an interview?" And he was very apologetic. So yeah, that was my first time that Alex Pritchard came into my life, albeit not very far. I suppose I think I'm burnt by the past. I see 30 years old. I see a 2.5-year contract, and I'm a little bit, oh no, we've done this before. But I don't suppose we have any other option but to trust Mowbray to bring in the players at this stage of the evolution of the team, right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the players who you're probably referring to there, I mean, players don't, they're not finished at 32, are they? And that's what he'll be when that contract comes to end, or maybe 33. So I think it's a player who's still in his prime. His game's never been based around speed as an explosiveness. So he's not gonna instantly, have a significant drop off over 2 or 3 months. I wouldn't think so. I really like this signing. Of the three, this is the one that really stands out to me as somebody who can come in, have that instant impact. And we mentioned actually in recent podcasts about Mowbray wanting a couple of bodies in who could show the team how to play the way he wants, who could control the ball and manipulate the ball. And I think Pritchard, along with Dazelle, probably are the two that he was alluding to or thinking about there. Sung Ho Peck is obviously another player of great potential we might as well come on to now. Someone with 15 caps for a very, very good national team, who's played in Europe before, got a lot of experience in the K-League, wants to break into English football. Bit of an all-rounder in midfield as far as I'm aware. So, yeah, that one I think will take a little bit more time because he's almost having pre-season, having finished his league season in Korea 2 months ago. But the other two strike me as players who will instantly make an impact and instantly probably be in the starting 11.
Where do we see Shemps fitting in, guys? Is it in the sort of the deeper line midfield roles, getting the ball off the defenders?
Yeah, I've watched 4 or 5 full K-League games that he played last season, and I think one of the things that struck me most was how adaptable and versatile he is as a player. So, a couple of games where he was playing in a midfield 2 and a 4-2-3-1, where he was dropping really, really deep, almost between the two central defenders, taking the ball from them, being that kind of orchestrator of the attacks, building forward. He played in a midfield 2 and a 4-4-2. I think he's played a couple of games as a striker, even few in an attacking midfield role. So he's really adaptable and versatile. I think that's something that Mowbray's come out and said in recent weeks, that he likes players like that. I think he referenced the other day, didn't he, that Cody Drummond could play as a right back or even as a right centre back. So having somebody who's able to do that, I think, is crucial in a squad. Where do I see him fitting in best? And I know, having kind of spoken to a few people on Twitter and who've seen him play a lot more, they kind of say his role is he's better going forward. From having watched him a little bit, and it is only 4 or 5 games, I think he could be really, really crucial and could be that missing link that we've that's evaded this Blues team for a long time, in terms of somebody that can take the ball from defence and transition it forward. He looked really, really comfortable receiving the ball on the half turn or facing his own goal and then turning into midfield before progressing the ball forwards. You can see that he's been part of Barcelona's famed La Masia Academy. He's always finding space. He's constantly moving. He looks like he's thinking a couple of steps ahead as well. So all of this, I think, is things that have been missing from this Blues midfield for a long time, and I think will only benefit in the way that we want, or this transition to the way that we want to play and the way that Mowbray wants to play. So, this is probably the signing that I'm most excited for, because I think it's a little bit unknown and it's a bit different. What was he, first South Korean player for Blues men's team? So yeah, really exciting, that one.
Yeah, he's the one that excites me. I think it's quite telling that the three players that have come in are all midfielders, isn't it? And that's the issue. That's the area that Mowbray's addressed. We're all jumping up and down about goalkeepers and strikers, and Mowbray's brought in three midfielders.
Yeah, there was actually a moment yesterday in the press conference that he talked about the two midfielders that he named in his first Blues starting 11, being Ivan Sunjic and Christian Bielik, and actually saying they have great qualities, but in terms of technically and playing the ball forward, it's probably not their greatest strength, and that Bielik's now moved to a defensive position where he's obviously more comfortable than the blue centre backs in playing the ball through those lines into midfield. And Sunjic is a different type of midfielder to the other three that Blues have now got in Jordan James, Andre Dazelle and Sung Ho Peck. So there's probably still a role for him as well. I know we're going to come on to him a little bit later too, but it just feels like there's a nice balance to it now, to be honest.
What we say, so taking the window as a whole, players that came, players that didn't go, players that didn't come, that you didn't want to come. Ryan, what was the best thing about Blues transfer window, do you think?
I think it is just that we look like we're in a better place to be able to play the kind of football Mowbray wants to play now. All season. When you think back to the games under Eustace, a lot of our play tend to come from out wide and then try and move back inside. So we tend to play a lot with either Laird or Drame down the right, and then Anderson or Dembele down the left, and that was kind of our avenue. So Long would see less of the ball. Bielik and Sunny could be there to basically bring their midfield on, and it'd be Sanderson and Buchanan that would start the play in those sort of like inside, sort of kind of like wide centre back positions. And that's where a lot of our play started from, if it wasn't us, winning the ball higher up. So it gives us the option. Mowbray obviously wants us to start trying to feed the ball through the centre of the pitch and sort of cut teams open to be able to get the wide men involved higher up the pitch rather than having to drive us forward. And I think that provides us with more of the signings obviously give us that balance to be able to try and do that. Hopefully we've got more technical ability in there, and you can just trust the players. Obviously, we saw at the weekend with, Sunjic losing the ball twice against Leicester in, tight sort of areas where you can't entirely blame him for losing the ball, but at the same time, you're kind of hoping that a better, more naturally gifted footballer sort of keeps the ball in those situations and doesn't lose it there. And I think that's what we'll probably see more of now. And when you look at it from another perspective, Dazal's left-footed. And it might seem a silly little thing, but he can now open the ball out onto his left. So we've got midfielders that are right-footed that can move the ball that way. We've got a left-footed midfielder in there now who sort of naturally will open up towards his left foot. So again, you've kind of got that option to be able to play both sides rather than potentially Bielik and Sunjic played a lot of their passes where they received the ball off Sanderson or Laird, and it'd be either straight back to the centre half or they'd just feed it round the corner rather than maybe opening back out to open the play up from there. So yeah, it just gives us a lot more options in terms of the way we can play now rather than having to move in specific ways down the pitch to get sort of key players involved and get us into the final third.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Dazelle is one of those, the left of the two deeper line midfield pivots. You can see him opening up his body and bringing Dembele into the game more, can't you? And it's interesting that is because Enzo Maresca at Leicester has spoken endlessly about needing a left-footed left centre back for his three at the back, and because, as you say there, Ryan, it just means the left side of the pitch is available to you. So, that is interesting, and it was interesting that he made reference to the fact that he's left-footed. He called it a wand of a left foot, didn't he? So, that does sound really promising. Yeah,
I think one other thing as well we should probably more of obviously. I'm going to say his name right now, but Parkinson Ho, obviously, as Alex has mentioned, he's coming into the league. He's not played since December. He's probably going to have a mini pre-season. He's going to take a little bit of time to adapt. Whereas Pritchard and Dazal, they've already started 15, 20 games in this league this season. They're not coming in, having not kicked a ball all campaign. They know the division. They know exactly what's needed. They come in and they should be able to just step straight into the side in order to give us what we need in there, rather than having to slowly bring them into the fold, which again is important in terms of Mowbray, I suppose, trying to make things happen sooner rather than later.
Ben, what was the best thing that what did or didn't happen in the transfer window? You can say Mowbray coming in if you want.
I mean, that was I think that's a really great addition, and he's certainly seemed to bring some of the feel-good factor back that was there at the start of the season and kind of unite the fan base again. I don't think you can underestimate the fact that we've kept hold of both Jay Stansfield and Jordan James. I think that's pretty big for our season. I would say, and possibly a slightly unpopular take, I don't think it would have completely derailed our season had JJ have gone. As good as he's been recently, I don't think it would have massively derailed our season. I think Stansfield going back or going elsewhere probably would have been a bigger miss for Blues in the second half of the season. So I think the fact that we've got him until the end of the year is fantastic. Probably that, to be honest, and less so about the incomings, more about those that didn't go out the door.
You've absolutely stolen my answer there, so I'm going to hand straight over to Alex.
No, I would say exactly the same about Stansfield. I think because he is the only, I don't think he's really a striker, but because he's the only guy who can play higher up the pitch out of those forwards, losing him and those 9 goals that he scored, and some of them very, very crucial goals, I think would have been, disastrous for Blues. Then you'd have to go out and replace him. And we've already said how hard it is to find a striker in January or a forward who can score goals in January. Having to replace Jay Stansfield would have been pretty much impossible. So that was the big one for me. I actually agree with Ben on JJ, and we've spoken about JJ before, but I don't think losing him would have been, disastrous if the fee had been good in this window. But I'm actually very glad they've kept him, because I think with the prospect of him going to the Euros in the summer and potentially playing there for Wales and doing well, coupled with working under Mowbray for another 4 months, he's got, I think he'll have a year plus a year's option left on his contract at the end of this season, so 2 years effectively. Blues could command big money for him, and they, Tony Mowbray's already started to reference that Adam Wharton transfer to Crystal Palace for, rising to £22 million. So, if it was going to be, say, £10 million in this window, there's no reason why it couldn't be £20 million in the summer if he continues along this trajectory. 6 goals in 25 games, whatever, for a midfielder is a really, really good return.
Yeah, I actually thought JJ's game against Leicester last weekend was the best I've seen him play for Blues. I just thought he was head and shoulders the leader of that team for me. And I know he had a really good pre-season, but even then, he didn't get into Eustace's side, and it was, where does he fit into this situation or into this formation? Now, I don't mind if he plays in the pivot. I don't mind if he plays in one of the 10s. It just feels like he can do it all now. So yeah, the penny's really dropped, and he's playing football like a man now, isn't he, JJ?
I think that's one of the. I think that's the big thing, is that young players, the development can be so, it's not linear, is it? And you can. I think we've seen it before. I think Demi Gray had one of those things where he came in, looked like a kid, and all of a sudden it was like he was quicker than everyone else. He was strong, and he could take anybody on. Like, he just looked like an absolute real threat all of a sudden and just sort of turn into a kid into a fully fledged first team player. I wonder how much the confidence taken from his games for Wales has helped with that. And I think it was a curious sort of timing whereby, Eustace left, he played that game against Croatia in that international break, came back and almost like, I'm guessing regular game time for Blues helped, but afterwards, but he seemed to come back with this like different sort of, I don't know, almost like different stature about him.
Yeah.
Just to answer the question on the best thing about the window, I think the off-field news is probably as big as the on-field news, isn't it? I think being able to look forward to the summer now with the stadium sponsor, the OVG sponsorship, we're in a position whereby we probably knew anyway, even if we didn't do anything in this window, we were probably going to stay up now. Mowbray's in charge. So being able to look ahead and know that things are going to take place in the summer that are, it feels like a completely different world all of a sudden. And I think that's probably the big news in the January window, that as bad as it sounds, you almost think we get through these next 5 months and see sort of slight changes and stuff like that. And come the summer, you know that you've got this potentially really, really exciting window again.
Yeah, here's us sat there talking about, which foot a midfielder plays with, and the landscape has actually changed, hasn't it? In the last month or so, with the war on K-pop and the stadium, and the stadium naming, it's absolutely, we're talking details, and actually the bigger picture is just absolutely unrecognisable. You referenced Dimmy Gray there, Ryan. Dimmy Gray left in a January transfer window, didn't he, when the previous regime sold him for 3.75 million. And it was just a fraction. He was worth twice that at the time. And I know transfers fees have inflated, but that was just a bit of a panic thing, wasn't it? Blues had no bargaining power. They convinced him to sign a new contract the previous summer, but with a low release clause in it. The current ownership, they have the power because they have the money now, don't they? And all these, all these off-field initiatives, just they're making my trust issues melt away, I've got to say. You make a good point there. Is there anything we'd have liked to have happened that didn't happen?
The only thing I could think of is the goalkeeper situation, but that was always towards the end of the window, wasn't it? It's probably obviously not something Blues set out to do, because they've got two goalkeepers who are out of contract in the summer, but injuries happen, don't they? Hopefully Blues can get through it. So that's the only thing I'd look at. I wasn't really having the striker thing, to be honest. I know it's going to be an unpopular opinion, but when you look at Mowbray Sunderland team, they played with two false nines. He's effectively playing that way now with Pritchard potentially and also Jay Stansfield. So there's loads of players you can fit into those two positions. Up front, you've got Tyler Roberts behind those two. You've got Bakuna, who played well against Stoke. Dembele could probably do it as well. We know Koji Miyoshi can do it. Keshi Anderson's almost out of the picture now. He was very good at the start of the season. So there are lots of options in those positions. George Hall's coming back as well, another big one. So I didn't think a striker was, absolutely essential. I'd rather Blues wait and get the right player in the summer.
Go on. Sorry,
yeah, I think it's quite telling as well, really, isn't it? That even there weren't any sort of real tangible links to a striker in the window necessarily. So it didn't ever appear to be something that was on the minds of the club or of Mowbray necessarily, despite the fact, that quite a few fans have called for, the fact that we need a striker. And I think you're spot on, Alex, in terms of Mowbray has played previously without any recognised strikers. Alex Pritchard did it a fair bit last season. And I think actually the wide players in this system will be, are really crucial to contributing towards the goals as well. So I guess I'm with you a little bit in terms of a striker would have been fantastic, but you don't get those sorts of strikers in January, and I'm glad that we didn't push through a sale of JJ below market value just to splash a couple of million on a striker that in 6 months' time we kind of look at and go, probably not going to be at the requisite level for what we need going forward. The whole approach just seems to have been, let's get through to the summer and that's where the rebuild essentially will take place, and that's where they're going to put their money.
I think we saw this under Zola as well, didn't we? Where, we went into the January window, and what we signed that window, Craig Gardner aside, we signed a young kid up front, then we signed fullbacks and wingers, and you haven't actually addressed the central part of the team, which is going to be pivotal to us being able to play the kind of football that we want to play. So addressing those sort of more defensive areas in the centre of the pitch first is probably a lot more important than bringing in a striker this window, or having to change the goalkeeper, who is still a very competent goalkeeper at the level. So I'd probably say that we've gone the right way about it. And worst comes to the worst, if we did have a massive run of injuries or something like that, that you can still call upon Hogan, Djukovic. They are still players that are capable of performing in the Championship and doing a job for us until the end of the season. So it's not like you're in a situation where you've got, Stansfield, the only striker we've got, and we've just got kids coming through afterwards. We have got players that are competent at the level behind them. They're just not what we need or want moving forward. We want better moving forward, which is absolutely fine.
Yeah, like Alex, I think I'd say just maybe the goalkeeper, but listen, we don't actually know how serious John Ruddy's injury is. But if Blues, let's say it's 5 games, and I am absolutely guessing there. Let's say it's 5 games, and Blues have to play Neil Etheridge for 5 games. Yes, he's not Edison, is he? But he's still a very competent shot stopper and commands his area pretty well when he's on his game. So yeah, I think you're right, Ryan. I agree with you actually. Getting players who can get the ball into the final third is more important than worrying about who's in the final third. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Best 11. I think this might get a bit sticky if we all just sit and reel off four different 11s. Alex, you wrote a piece with your favoured 11 yesterday. Why don't you give us that, and us three will pick it apart?
Okay, so I'm now talking when everyone's fit, when everyone's physically up to speed as well. So Ruddy in goal, right back Laird, centre back Sanderson and Bielik for the way Mowbray wants to play, left back Buchanan. 2 defensive minded midfielders. I do think Dazelle will start initially, but on paper I'm going with Peck and Jordan James. And then the 3 in front, right side Miyoshi, left side Dembele, Pritchard behind Jay Stansfield.
I've got exactly the same 11 written down.
Yeah, me too. Okay, all right. Ben, kill him.
Yeah, no, to be fair, I've got the same 11 as well, with a couple of asterisks. I think I wouldn't lose any sleep if Cody Dramé started ahead of Ethan Laird.
Okay.
Laird probably gives you a little bit more impetus going forward, but I certainly don't think that it's a weak point for Dramé at all. And I guess what you get with, despite the fact that he is injured currently, I think obviously you get a little bit more availability from Cody Dramé. And then the only other one, and Alex, I think you mentioned him earlier, so probably a good time to talk about him, Ivan Sunjic. Now, I am not a big Sunjic fan. I never have been. But I do think he still potentially has a slight role to play, or certainly has a role to play in the rest of this season. I don't think Peck is a ball winner. Even when he plays in those deeper midfield roles, and it's not it's not that he shirks away from it, or that physically he's not able. It's just not part of his game. That's not what it's about. Yeah, it's a difficult one. So potentially, I think I do think there is an opportunity for Sunjic to still be involved. Obviously, what you lose with him being in the side is technical quality on the ball. So it's a toss up, but then it's difficult because Pritchard, you would think, is probably going to be a fairly guaranteed starter moving forward, and then you've got to fit JJ into that as well. So Yeah, and obviously you've got Dizelle to play a part as well. So yeah, really difficult one. But it was just an asterisk that I put against Sunjic.
To be fair, there's nothing saying Blues can't be flexible in formation as well. Like they could quite easily play a 4-3-3 and put Pritchard off the left to begin with. JJ could play as the 10 with Peck and potentially Sunjic in games where they are going to have less of the ball. So it could be a 4-3-3/4-2-3-1, but a slightly more defensively minded one. They've got a lot of good players for those positions. I think the great thing that they have done by signing these two midfield players is they've succession planned in the event that JJ does leave in the summer, so that they wouldn't need to go out and have clubs hold them to ransom, knowing they've got a big transfer kitty because they've sold a player for let's say it's 15 million to a side. So yeah, I think it's been a really, really shrewd move to address those positions first.
Alex, you've put on here something about Jay Stansfield.
This is from Ben's point, to be fair. When we were kind of drafting up ideas for this podcast, Ben mentioned about Jay Stansfield. With Hogan, Djukovic both out of contract in the summer, Stansfield coming to the end of his loan. Blues could effectively go into the summer window without a striker. So the question is, would you put all your eggs into Stansfield's basket and try and sign him permanently from Fulham? Because we know Tony Mowbray has already suggested that he would like to do that. Or do you spread the money out that it would take to sign Stansfield over 2 or 3 different forwards?
Interesting.
I think for me, we're going to need to bring in a lot of footballers in the summer again. We know that we're probably heading towards a summer where we have to sign about 10 players a game. So spending that kind of money right now doesn't seem the wisest thing in the world, unless you absolutely know he's a guaranteed sure thing. I think there comes a time where you make all those changes, you put yourself in a much better position, and hopefully this will come by the summer of, what would it be, 25? And we are in a position where we actually only need to add 3 or 4 players to improve the quality of the squad. And that's where you can maybe go, right, we've got 10 million to play with here. We can get him on a free, we can get him for that. Might be able to bring him on loan, and then we've got another 8 million to play with, and we can make that big signing and sort of bring them in. And so I think this summer's probably not the one where you go, let's spend 10 million on a footballer. But I mean, obviously, if the club can make that kind of thing work, and particularly for someone like Stansfield, who knows his ceiling's so high, and everyone at the club seems to absolutely adore him. The fans love him. So, if you can make it work, I guess you make it work. But for now, I don't think this summer's the one where we start splashing out 5 million on every single footballer. It's that we've got a lot of work to sort out just to get us in a position whereby we are ready to challenge. But that could also come from a point of view of not maybe knowing what the budget is. We might have a very, very good budget, and even better, even bigger than our wildest dreams this summer. I guess we don't know yet.
Well, yeah. 3 million bonus from that BTS row.
Yeah. Or might that go on a certain copyright situation? I think my concern is putting, I think, the eggs to put into Stansfield's basket. I think Stansfield's basket will be very deep, and you need a lot of eggs, as in he's going to cost a lot of money. I don't think Fulham will necessarily be quite ready to cash in on him yet. I think they'll potentially want to have a look at him in the Premier League, or else loan him to a lower to another Premier League side or real top end Championship side. I don't think Blues are quite in the market where, yes, we're going to have deeper pockets. I don't know if the pockets will be that deep to pay 10 million for Stansfield, if that's what it'll cost. As attractive as it would seem, because he is. We haven't replaced Shea Adams. We were saying this earlier, but is as close as we've got to replacing Shea Adams, isn't he? Really, Ben? It was your question. What's your point? What's your theory on it?
I'd echo Ryan's points. I think that the squad overhaul this summer is going to be massive, and with the churn of players is going to be huge, and there'll be at least 10 new additions, you would think, during the summer, without knowing anything to do with what that transfer budget might look like. It's difficult to say yes. We throw the money that would be required at him to sign him, albeit I would absolutely love to, because I think on the evidence of this season, I would put a fair amount of money on him being successful going forward. I don't feel like it would be a massive risk to say, actually, if we spend 8-10 million on him, that he's gonna flop. But yeah, I do agree. We're going to need lots of incomings, and blowing the entire budget potentially on a single player is not the wisest thing to do. And I don't think it's the route that the club would go down. Having just sat here listening to you guys talking about it, if the option became available to loan him for a second season for a couple of million, let's say, Fulham turn around and say, well, you can have him back, but it'll cost you a couple of million in a loan fee. Is that one where we're shaking their hand pretty quickly and saying, yep?
Yeah, snapping the arm off, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's hard not to want something more permanent, isn't it? That's a difficult one. You'd like to think the club are working on targets now, wouldn't you, in terms of the summer, and maybe having an idea of what type of profile of striker Mowbray wants and who we could potentially sign this summer. It feels like one of them where you'd probably reach maybe the end of July, August, and if you haven't got anybody in or you haven't got the right targets in, then maybe you go back and look at it. But it's hard not to want something more permanent, try and avoid maybe relying on loans so much. I know they're always going to be an important part, but maybe try to avoid a reliance on loans so much, which is hard because, I absolutely love Stansfield, but ultimately he's not the only striker out there that can score goals, and Mowbray might actually want a different profile of striker in the summer too. If you think of the guys that he had at Blackburn, they were all shapes and sizes, weren't they? So, but I suspect, regardless, because of the internationals, the Euros are this summer as well, aren't they? We'll be in a position whereby Fulham most Premier League clubs are going to keep hold of their talent until close to the end of the summer, for the start of the season, before they start letting them go out. So I'd imagine it'd be a case of if we can't bring in the permanent options before then hopefully we can sort of go back, and maybe that would just be an option we keep on the table for something exciting before the start of the season, maybe.
Just to counter it, I if it's like £6 to £8 million for Stansfield, given that he's 21 years old, like Ben said earlier, I think it's a relatively low risk deal. I from everything we've seen of Stansfield, I think he's going to go on to have a good career, and I think it's a player at that fee Blues could probably make money on in a few years anyway. If the money's there, I would be inclined to try and do it, to be honest. If Blues could reach that number, when you think could only be two years of social media bonuses anyway, couldn't it really? So I would try and do everything they possibly can to make Stansfield a permanent Blues player, because I don't think he's going to outgrow the Championship this year. I don't think he's going to be ready for the Premier League next year, to be honest. I think he's probably going to need another year in the Championship. So why not play for a Blues team, with players he's played with for a season already, with fans, in front of fans who love him, and help the team challenge at the right end of the league next year.
Depends how big how much money there is, isn't it? Really, if you can do what Ryan said and put the building blocks in place and get Stansfield on top, then obviously you do it as well, don't you? Yeah. I'm conscious we've got some questions which I'd like to move on to. John Sambrooks, do you think they'll offer JJ a new contract to either secure long-term future or increase his value for the summer window? What do you reckon?
It feels like it'd be naive not to have those conversations, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Whether we can actually get it over the line with the money on offer, I'd imagine from us. If he's talking Premier League, that immediately there's just a huge increase in wage that we're just not going to compete with, isn't there? In the Championship, unless we start doing daft things like we were under Dong. So that to me just seems like you've got to ask the question, but whether it ends up with a case of he signs a new contract with a release clause in based on us not winning promotion or something, I guess you guys might have a better idea of how these things work than we do as fans.
I think the thing I'd say about JJ, I think the club probably, you tend to look at contracts with about 18 months left, don't you? So, they have got an option. So we're getting towards that. They've got 2 years at the end of this season, effectively, with the option. I think you probably have to acknowledge now that he's the club's most valuable asset. So you're probably going to need to start paying him like he's one of your most valuable assets and most valuable players. So probably put him in the top bracket of earners. That's not going to be what it was, 3 years ago at Birmingham City. And, he'd get more money if he went to a Premier League club or even a Serie A club. But I'd be surprised if Blues didn't do everything they can to keep him beyond the summer if he didn't leave in the summer. But I think the landscape's changed now. I think the next 6 months his value is going to rocket. I think his value can only go up. So Blues are going to be better for keeping him on deadline day.
If you're asking me, do I expect JJ to be in a blue shirt at the start of next season? I would have to say my expectation would be no. I'd say it's probably more likely that he goes because of where his career is than he stays, I think. Do we agree with that?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love for him to still be in a blue shirt come the start of next season. But yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you both and say that my hunch is that he probably won't be. I think what's important is, again, maybe slightly unpopular, that we don't lose him for nothing. Because he's under 21, so it would go to tribunal, I think, in terms of sorting out fees if he did end up leaving at the end of his contract. We're a long way away from that, but I think it's important that as much as we would love to see JJ in a blue shirt for the next 10 years, that seems at the moment potentially a little bit unlikely, although you never know. So I think it's important that when we've got these assets that we don't sell them under market value, but equally we don't price themselves out of a move and end up losing them for nothing at some point, because we've seen occasions and examples of that happen over the last few kind of 10 years or so. So I don't think he'll be with us next season, but would love for him to be.
We're talking a lot about midfielders today. Next question from Seb is: do you think Sunjic deserves a new contract? Personally, I think Sunjic is great for the balance of the team and is an absolute workhorse. The amount of times he wins the ball back with his pressing is absurd. Sunjic, Brian, what are you saying?
Oh dear. Okay. Why does he have to win the ball back? Because he's given it away. Not a new contract for me, I'm afraid. I know Ben's spoken about he brings balance and gives something extra that the other midfielders haven't got. Not for me. I think it's time for Blues to move on. I'd like someone with Sunjic's energy and tenacity and a bit more technical ability as well. Those players do exist. It's not an either or. Yes, it will cost something. It will cost a lot potentially to get someone like that in. Maybe one of the new midfielders might. Dazelle and Peck don't really strike me as great ball winners, but maybe if you're having 67% of the ball, which is what Mowbray wants, then maybe you don't need to win the ball back so often. So for me, the evolution of the team moves away from Ivan Sunjic, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I don't think Mowbray at Sunderland play with Pierre Ekwa and Dan Neil as his midfielders, didn't these two midfielders? I don't think they're great ball winners. Sunderland had most of the ball, didn't they, anyway? So I think long term, we're probably heading towards two ball playing midfielders playing those positions.
Go on, Ben.
No, after you, Ryan.
I was just going to say, obviously, when you consider, he brought through Lewis Travis as well, didn't he, at Blackburn? It's just having guys in there that are able to tie the ball and are physically capable enough to, get up and down the pitch. Sunjic, I agree with Ben. I think he's got a role for the rest of this season because I don't think we have the type profile of midfielder at the moment that can do that job. And there are going to be times where, we are going to have to back down matches, win the ball, and have someone in there who is just like a dog chasing the bone. But come the summer, you can't help but feel we have to move away from the top midfielders. Basically, we've loved for years because we've always been one of the worst teams in the league as far as possession goes, and we've had to have those guys in the team. You're just hoping that come the summer you can bring in a guy. You look at Lewis Travis as an example. Yes, he's feisty, can win the ball and all the rest of it, but he's technically very capable. He can take the ball in most positions. He's now playing for Ipswich towards the top of the league. That's kind of where you want to go. You want the balance of, yes, he can run around and win the ball and press and do the dogged work, and also take the ball in any position on the pitch, which sadly Sunjic can't do.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you all as well. As much as I think that he does have a role to play in the next 6 months, he doesn't, for me, have a role to play beyond that point. I think it's time to say thank you, but we move on. As you say, Brian, they're not mutually exclusive, being technical and being tenacious. You can find players that will do both, and there are players out there that we could bring in, and I think we probably should look to bring in the summer. But yeah, a role for the next 6 months, but not after that point for me either.
Fairly emphatic. I'm conscious of time, guys. We've got a few takes, which I'll read. I don't necessarily think we've got time to go deep with all of them. Pink Panther says every window seems to close with us having to fly by the seat of our pants with striker depth. Here we are, an injury away from a bit of a problem, i.e. if Stansfield gets injured. I know the summer we'll see us overhaul the striking department. I think we've talked about the striker situation and other players' ability to maybe fill a role that Mowbray can create for them in his team. Joe Watson says, I think the club is learning from the mistakes of previous regimes and windows. Getting players in for the sake of it isn't the way forward unless they're going to be directly involved in moving the club forward. I don't want them. I'm happy we didn't make any late mistakes. I think we'd all echo that, wouldn't we? No panic buys. There wasn't any particular sort of massive hole in the team, like when we brought Longhello in. There was no left back, or only one left back, wasn't there? And so yeah, that does reflect well on the club. And Kieran says, whilst we won't be thinking about the playoffs, we've had a solid window. Brought in a new manager who looks a great appointment, and brought in 3 midfielders who look like they could be central to his style and implementation. All cheap and low risk. We know the summer will be a big one, which is pretty much where we all feel, isn't it? It's when this room in the budget appears, when the pre-pandemic contracts are finally off the books, and hopefully the FFP balance is more in Blues' favour. Then it's really time to kick on. The final point, Alex, do you just want to run through this? You've said that Damien and a few others are asking about the goalkeeper situation. A little bit concerned about, with Ruddy out, just having Etheridge and Brad Mayo. An emergency loan be a possibility. And yeah, go on, talk us through the situation and what might happen, and then we'll wrap it up.
So it's in case Etheridge gets injured, then Blues will be able to sign the emergency loan. They'd be able to go and ask any Premier League clubs whether they'd be able to take one of their goalkeepers, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. The key yesterday was the paying up Zach G-Cock's contract. Obviously, because he's a goalkeeper on Blues books. Had Neil Etheridge got injured, then Tony Mowbray would have been asked to play G-Cock in the Championship because he has prior experience in the league, having played in 21 and 22. So by releasing him, they have made sure that in the event, hopefully it does, fingers crossed, doesn't happen, that Etheridge got injured while Ruddy is out as well, they would be able to go and sign an emergency loan goalkeeper. I believe there was a goalkeeper lined up yesterday where if Blues had been able to get a player off the books, but obviously that didn't happen, so they couldn't go and sign anyone else. But yeah, hopefully Blues don't need an emergency goalkeeper. That's the most important thing we should add.
Yeah, indeed. Right, brilliant, folks. Thanks very much for your attention. Ryan, do you just want to tell us again where we can find your stuff? Yeah,
so I'm on Substack and Twitter or X, and my @ is Ryan Deeney 2194.
Brilliant, thank you. And do go and check it out. Ryan writes some really illuminating stuff, so do that. And Ben?
I can be found on Twitter or X as well, at @blues_breakdown.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And you know where we are. We're on the Birmingham Live website. Please hit subscribe either on Spotify or YouTube. Thank you all for joining us, guys, and thank you all for listening. And it's a one big collective keep right on from all of us.